she wasn't afraid of the dark. That was the thing people never understood about Christiana. She had always been the kind of person who could sit in a quiet house at midnight and feel nothing but the ordinary comfort of her own company. She had moved into the rental on Vellum Road alone, on purpose, because she needed the silence. Because silence, for her, had always meant safety. She was wrong about that. It was a Tuesday night in late October when it started. Christiana was at her desk, headphones half on, working through a backlog of medical transcription files. The lamp beside her cast a small warm circle of light across her keyboard. The rest of the bedroom was dark, the way she liked it. The hallway beyond her partially open door was darker still. She reached for her water without looking up. And then she looked up. There was a man in the hallway. He was standing completely still, positioned so that only a sliver of him was visible through the 2-inch gap of her door. One eye. One shoulder. The long vertical line of a body that was not moving, not shifting, just watching her through that narrow opening with a patience that did not belong to anything human. For a moment, her brain simply refused to process it. It offered her alternatives. A coat on a hook. A trick of shadow. The particular way tired eyes invent shapes in darkness. Then the eye blinked. Christiana did not scream. Later, she would not be able to explain why. Something in her went very still and very cold, and in that coldness she found a specific, terrible clarity. She held eye contact, or what felt like eye contact through that sliver of door, for exactly 1 second. Then he was gone. Not retreating. Not stepping back. Gone. As though the dark had simply closed around him. Christiana locked her bedroom door. Pushed her desk chair under the handle. Picked up her phone and called 911 with the quiet, mechanical calm of someone whose panic had traveled so far inward it no longer had a surface expression. "There's someone in my house," she said. "He was standing in my hallway. I'm locked in my bedroom. Are you safe right now?" "I don't know," she said. "I don't know where he went." Detective Rowe arrived 20 minutes later with 2 patrol officers. They were thorough. She would give them that. They checked every room, every closet, every window. They went into the crawl space under the house with flashlights. They walked the perimeter twice. They found nothing. Every window was locked from the inside. Every door was undamaged. There were no footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing overturned or taken. The house looked exactly the way it would look if no one had ever been inside it but her. Rowe sat across from her at the kitchen table with his notepad and a look she would come to recognize over the following weeks, the look of a man who believed her completely and could do absolutely nothing about it. "I saw him," she said. It came out flatter than she intended. "I know what I saw." "I don't doubt you," Rowe said. And he meant it. "But without a point of entry, without any physical evidence, I can't give you much beyond a report number and my card." She took the card. She watched the patrol car pull out of her driveway from the front window. Then she stood in the silence of her house alone and understood, for the first time in her adult life, what it meant to be truly afraid of a room. She did not sleep that night. Or the night after. By the 3rd day she had developed a specific ritual, every light on before dark, every interior door open so there were no places she couldn't see, the bedroom chair wedged under the handle anyway, her phone face up on the pillow beside her. She lay on top of the covers fully dressed and listened to the house breathe. The nightmares, when sleep finally took her, were always the same. She was in her bed. The room was dark. She opened her eyes and something tall was standing at the foot of the mattress. It had the approximate shape of a person, the right height, the right silhouette, but something about its proportions was slightly, indefinably wrong. It did not move. It did not speak. It simply stood there at the foot of her bed with the stillness of something that had been standing there for a very long time and intended to keep standing there. She always woke before she could see its face. During the day she made small errors in her work. Misheard words. Dropped sentences. A wrong medication name that her quality checker caught before it became a problem. These were things she never did. She was meticulous, had been meticulous, and watching that precision erode frightened her in a different, quieter way than the man in the hallway had. She told herself it was a burglar who lost his nerve. Someone casing the neighborhood who had not expected her to be awake. A random event with no sequel. She told herself it was over. She almost believed it. 5 weeks passed. Not 5 easy weeks, 5 weeks of hypervigilance slowly, grudgingly relaxing into something that resembled normal life. She started sleeping without the light on. Started leaving interior doors closed again. Stopped keeping her phone on the pillow. The nightmares became less frequent, then infrequent, then something she only remembered occasionally in the middle of the afternoon with a cold flash that faded quickly. By the end of the 5th week, she had almost completed the project of convincing herself. She was making dinner on a Wednesday evening, pasta, something simple, the radio on low, when she heard the sound from upstairs. 3 beats. Slow and deliberate, like something testing the weight of the floor. Then silence. Then 3 beats again. Christiana turned off the stove. Stood completely still with a wooden spoon in her hand and her head tilted toward the ceiling, listening with every part of herself. The 3rd set of 3 beats. Then nothing. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. She looked at the screen for a long time. Hello? 1 word. Lowercase. The specific casual intimacy of it made her feel physically ill. She did not reply. She called Ro. A patrol car came and went. They found no one upstairs, no one outside, no sign of anything. The number, when Ro ran it, was a prepaid burner. Already inactive. These things are bought with cash, Ro told her on the phone that evening, with the tone of a man delivering an apology. Whoever sent that didn't want to be found. She locked every window in the house that night. Checked each one twice. 3 nights later Christiana was washing dishes at the kitchen sink. It was late, close to 11, and the yard beyond the window was a wall of dark. She wasn't looking at it. She was watching the soap work between her fingers, thinking about nothing in particular, in that specific trance of late-night domestic routine. Something registered in her peripheral vision. Low to the ground. Near the tree line at the far edge of the yard. A faint, pale rectangle of light. The shape of a phone screen. Christiana went completely still. Her hands stopped moving in the water. She did not look directly at it. Some instinct told her not to react visibly, not to let whoever was holding it know that she had seen them. Instead she slowly, casually stepped back from the sink. Reached to her left and turned off the kitchen light. Stood in the darkness of the room and watched through the window. The light did not move. It held its position at the tree line with the steadiness of someone who had been standing there long enough to get comfortable. She counted. 1 minute. 2. 3. At 4 minutes and change, the light went out. She stood in her dark kitchen for a long time after that, doing the math she had been avoiding. The text had said hello. Sent from an unknown number while she was alone in the house. And now someone had been standing in her backyard in the dark, in the cold, holding a phone, watching her through her kitchen window. The text hadn't been sent from across town. It had been sent from 20 feet away. If this story is already getting under your skin, good. It should be. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what she finds next. It gets worse. It gets significantly worse. 2 nights after the backyard incident, the unknown number texted again. Same time, just past 11. She saw the notification and felt her stomach drop before she even unlocked the screen. 1 word. Soon. Ro traced it. Another burner. Already deactivated. He drove out to see her in person this time, which told her something about how seriously he was now taking this, even if his words were measured and careful. "We're treating this as credible harassment," he said. "I want you to stay with someone if you can." "I don't have anyone nearby," she said. He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. "Then keep your phone charged and your doors locked. I'll have a car drive past every few hours." "Every few hours?" She nodded and thanked him and closed the door and thought about everything that could happen in the space of a few hours. Several more weeks passed. If anything, the waiting was worse than the incidents themselves. The not knowing. The checking her phone every time it buzzed. The way she had developed a habit of scanning the tree line every time she stood at the kitchen sink, even in daylight. She was exhausted into a kind of gray, flat functionality. She was sleeping, she had to sleep eventually, but the sleep was shallow and populated with the familiar nightmare. The shape at the foot of the bed. Always there. Always still. On a night in late November, she fell asleep fully clothed on top of her covers, laptop open beside her, in the middle of a transcription file. The sleep took her suddenly, the way it does when the body simply stops negotiating. The nightmare came. She was in her bed. The room was dark. She opened her eyes and the shape was there at the foot of the mattress, the way it always was. And then she woke up. The room was dark. The laptop had died at some point, its screen black, its small indicator light unblinking. The house was silent in the specific, pressurized way it got at 3 a.m., when even the ambient hum of the world outside seemed to pause. She lay still. Oriented herself. Told herself it was just the nightmare. Then she heard it. Her name. Whispered. Softly and precisely, with the particular enunciation of someone who had been saying it for a long time and had gotten very good at it. Whispered from inside the room. Christiana turned her head toward the doorway. The shape was there. It was tall. That was the first thing her mind registered. Not its face, not its hands, not the specific wrongness of it that her brain was already trying to reject and categorize and file away somewhere manageable. Just the height. It filled the doorframe the way something would if it had measured the doorframe first. It was standing completely still, positioned just inside the threshold of her bedroom, not in the hallway, not hovering at the gap the way it had that first night. Inside. Past the boundary. Further than it had ever come before. And it was watching her. She could not see its face clearly. The room was too dark, and some part of her understood instinctively that her eyes were refusing to fully resolve what they were looking at, the same way the brain protects itself from certain kinds of truth by simply declining to render them in full detail. But she could see the shape of it. The approximate outline of shoulders that sat slightly too wide. Arms that hung slightly too long. A head that tilted at an angle no relaxed human neck would hold. It did not move. It did not speak. It simply stood in her doorway and existed, with the patience of something that had been waiting long before she moved in and would keep waiting long after. Christiana did not think. Thinking was not available to her in that moment. Thought requires the belief that there is time to think, and every cell in her body had arrived at the unanimous conclusion that there was not. She moved. Off the bed. Away from it. Past it, close enough that she felt the temperature change, a pocket of cold air that had no business existing in a heated room in November, close enough that she could have reached out and touched it if she had wanted to, which she did not, which she would never. Out the bedroom door. Down the hallway. Down the stairs, taking them two at a time in the dark, one hand dragging along the wall for orientation. Through the front door, which she had locked before bed and somehow got open anyway, and then she was on the porch, and then she was on the front path, and then she was on the sidewalk in bare feet on cold concrete at 3 in the morning with her phone already in her hand because she had grabbed it off the nightstand without consciously deciding to. She called 911. She stood on the sidewalk in the dark and did not look back at the house. She did not go back inside. Roe arrived in 12 minutes. He came in his own car this time, not a patrol vehicle, which meant she had called him directly and he had come anyway, at 3 in the morning, in his own car. She would think about that later, what it said about how seriously he was taking this now. What it said about how worried he was. He listened to everything she told him on the sidewalk. He did not interrupt. He did not offer alternatives or rational explanations. He just listened with his notepad closed and his pen uncapped and unused, and when she finished he looked at her for a moment and then looked at the house. "Stay here," he said. She stayed. He went in with 2 officers who had arrived while she was talking. She watched the lights come on room by room through the windows. Ground floor first. Then upstairs. Then the narrow rectangle of her bedroom window glowing yellow at the top of the house. She waited. After a while Roe came back out. He walked toward her slowly, the way people walk when they are organizing what they are about to say. "There's no one in the house," he said. She nodded. She had expected that. "But we found something." He took her around the side of the house. The back window, the one off the small utility room that she barely used, the one she had checked and locked and checked again, was closed. Looked locked. Looked exactly the way it always looked. Except that when Roe shone his flashlight along the frame, she could see it. The lock was gone. Not broken. Not forced. Gone, removed cleanly from the frame, the screw holes empty and slightly worn at the edges in the way that suggested this had not happened recently. Someone had taken the lock off. Someone had taken the time. One of the officers was crouched below the window, flashlight angled at the exterior sill. Roe guided her closer and she looked where the light was pointing. Marks. Along the sill. Down the exterior wall. In the soft earth below the window, in the narrow strip of ground between the house and the fence. Compressed. Layered. Marks left on top of marks on top of marks, each set slightly offset from the last, the way prints accumulate over time when the same action is repeated in the same place again and again and again. Roe crouched down beside the officer. Studied them. Stood back up. 10, he said quietly. Then he moved the flashlight slightly. 11. 12. He counted 15 before he stopped. 15. Christiana stood in the cold November air and let that number settle into her. Not once. Not a burglar who lost his nerve. Not a random event with no sequel. Not something she could chalk up to an overactive imagination and a stressful few months. 15 separate entries. 15 times something had come through that window, moved through her house, and left again. While she slept. While she worked. While she convinced herself it was over. It had been in her home 15 times, and she had known about exactly one of them. Roe walked her back in through the front door to collect a few things before taking her to a hotel. She was moving through the bedroom in a kind of controlled numbness. Charger, laptop, the small overnight bag she had started keeping half-packed weeks ago, because some part of her had known, when one of the officers called from the hallway. "Detective." Something in the flatness of his voice made her stop. Roe went to the hallway. She followed without being asked. The officer was standing in the open doorway of her bedroom closet, flashlight raised, pointed at the inside of the door. She looked at what he was illuminating. At approximately eye level, scratched into the white paint with something sharp, a key, maybe, or something narrower, was a single vertical line. Clean. Deliberate. Unhurried. Not damage. Not vandalism. The mark had been made by something that was not in a hurry, by something that had all the time it needed, in a closet, in her bedroom, while she was, what? Asleep? Working? Standing in the kitchen convincing herself she was safe? Rowe photographed it. Said something procedural to the officer. Turned to Christiana with an expression he was working to keep neutral. She spoke before he could. "It's keeping count," she said. He didn't answer. She looked at the mark for another moment. That's not the first tenant that line is for. She spent a week in a motel 40 minutes away. The room was beige and smelled like industrial cleaning products, and she loved it, specifically and genuinely, because it was the first space she had occupied in months that felt like hers and only hers. She slept with the deadbolt on and the chain across and a chair under the handle, old habits, but she slept. Properly. Deeply. The nightmare did not come. On the fourth night she called her closest friend. "You need to leave," Danny said, before Christiana had even finished explaining. "Not the house. The city. Go somewhere else." "It's not, Danny, it's a person. A person doing this. People don't just." "Christiana." A pause. "Listen to me. I don't care what it is. Go somewhere else." She almost told Danny about the mark in the closet. The single vertical line at eye level. The implication of it. She didn't. Some things, once said out loud to someone you love, become real in a way that can't be managed. She wasn't ready for it to be that real yet. She moved 2 weeks later. A new apartment on the other side of the city. 6th floor. Doorman. Every security feature she could afford. But before she finalized the new lease, she did something she had been avoiding. She started looking into the house. It took her 4 days of dead ends, county records, old rental listings, an online forum for the neighborhood that hadn't been active since years prior. She called the property management company twice and got polished, careful non-answers both times. On the 5th day she found the name of a former property manager, a man who had handled the house before the current company took it over, and she called the number she found for him on a professional directory. He picked up. She could tell immediately that he recognized the address. She could also tell, from the 2-second pause before he spoke, that he wished she hadn't called. "I don't really discuss former properties," he said. "I lived there," Christiana said. "I need to know about the other tenants." Another pause. Longer. "How many were there?" she asked. He told her she should talk to the current management company. "How many?" she said again. The silence stretched out between them like something with weight. "4," he finally said. "In 6 years. 4 tenants. 6 years." She had known she wasn't the first, the mark in the closet had told her that. But hearing the number out loud did something to the shape of it. What happened to them? They left. Why? They just left. People leave rentals. It happens. "The one before me," she said. "The one before that. Did they file police reports?" The silence this time was the longest yet. "The Callaway tenant," he said, very quietly. "He filed a report." And then he stopped returning calls. We assumed he'd moved out of state. You assumed? Yes. You never confirmed it. He didn't answer. What was in that house before it was a rental? Christiana said. It wasn't quite a question. I have to go, he said. The line went dead. She sat with the phone in her lap for a long time after that. 4 tenants. One who filed a report and then disappeared from any record she could find. A mark on the inside of a closet door. 1 line. She thought about the Callaway tenant, his name, his report, the specific mundane bureaucratic language that would have been used to document whatever he experienced. She thought about the way Rowe had counted the scuff marks. 15. Stopping only because he ran out of clearly distinct impressions, not because he had reached the end of them. She thought about what a single vertical line in a closet meant if the thing making it had been doing this for longer than 6 years. Longer than the property records went. Longer, maybe, than anyone still living could account for. She moved into the new apartment on a Friday. By the following Wednesday she had almost, let herself believe it was over. She was getting better at recognizing that feeling. The specific warmth of almost belief. The way safety, when you have been without it long enough, starts to feel like a thing you could choose. Like a room you could just decide to live in. She was learning. She just hadn't learned fast enough. She had been in the new apartment for 19 days when she woke up at 3 a.m. No sound woke her. No nightmare. No whispered name pulling her up out of sleep like a hook through water. She simply opened her eyes in the dark of her new bedroom, 6th floor, doorman, deadbolt, chain, chair, and was awake with the immediate, total alertness of someone whose nervous system had spent months being trained to treat consciousness as survival. She lay still. Listened. The apartment was quiet. The building around her made its ordinary nocturnal sounds, the elevator cable shifting somewhere in the shaft, a pipe contracting in the wall, the muffled texture of a city that never fully slept filtering up from 6 floors below. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. She was almost back asleep when she noticed the curtain. The window across the room was closed. Locked. 6 floors up with nothing outside it but air and city glow and the distant geometry of other buildings. But the curtain, the heavy blackout curtain she had hung specifically to sleep better in a new place, was moving. Not billowing. Not swinging. Just a slow, barely perceptible shift along its left edge. The way fabric moves when something disturbs the air beside it. The way it moves when something is standing very close. Christiana sat up. The curtain stilled. She reached for the lamp on the nightstand and turned it on, and the room assembled itself in the yellow light, familiar shapes, her furniture, her things, everything exactly where she had put it, and she exhaled slowly and told herself it was the ventilation system, it was a draft, it was nothing, it was. Her eyes landed on the windowsill. On the sill, placed with the deliberate care of something arranged rather than dropped, was a stone. Small. Pale gray. Slightly flattened on one side. She recognized it immediately and completely, the way you recognize something you have walked past every day for months without consciously cataloging it. It was from the garden path at the house on Vellum Road. She had stepped over it every morning going to her car. She had never touched it, never thought about it, never given it a single moment of conscious attention. It was here. On her windowsill. On the 6th floor. With the deadbolt on and the chain across and the chair under the handle and a doorman in the lobby and nothing outside the window but 60 feet of empty air. Christiana looked at the stone for a very long time. Then she picked up her phone. Put it back down. Picked it up again. She did not call Ro. She did not call Danny. She sat on the edge of her bed in the lamplight on the 6th floor of a building with a doorman and every lock she could buy, and she thought about the Callaway tenant, who had filed a report and then simply ceased to exist in any record she could find. She thought about the mark on the inside of the closet door. The single vertical line. She thought about Ro counting scuff marks in the dark and stopping at 15, not because he had reached the end but because that was all the flashlight could clearly resolve. She thought about what it meant that it had found her here. Not followed her. Found her. As though it had always known where she would go. As though her leaving had been accounted for. As though every move she made was a move inside a space it had already mapped. She thought about all of that. And then she made a decision. She called Ro at 7 in the morning. He answered on the second ring, which meant he had been awake, which meant some part of him had been waiting. It came to the apartment, she said. It left something. A silence. She could hear him processing it, the floor, the locked doors, the doorman, all of it. Christiana. I'm going back, she said. The silence this time was different. Longer. Heavier. I need you to listen to me, Rose said, in the careful, measured tone of someone choosing every word. Whatever is happening, going back to that house is not. You can't protect me, she said. Not unkindly. Just as a fact. The way you state a fact that both people already know but only one of them has said out loud. You've already proven that. The locks, the patrol cars, the hotel, the new apartment. None of it, Ro, none of it made any difference. A long pause. I know, he said quietly. 2 words. But the way he said them, without argument, without the reflexive reassurance she had expected, told her that he had arrived at the same place she had. That somewhere between the scuff marks and the closet and the stone on the 6th floor windowsill, he had stopped believing that procedure was going to solve this. Don't go alone, he said. I have to, she said. Christiana. If you come with me, it won't come. Whatever this is, it's been watching me. Specifically me. It knows the difference. Another silence. I'll park 2 streets away, he finally said. If you don't call me within 2 hours, I'm coming in. She almost told him that 2 hours was a long time. That 2 hours was long enough for a lot of things. Okay, she said instead. She drove to Vellum Road at 2 a.m. Not because 3 a.m. was when it came, though it was, always, with the clockwork consistency of something that operated on its own internal schedule, but because she wanted to be there first. She wanted to be inside, settled, waiting, before it arrived. She did not want to be the thing that was found in the dark. For once. She let herself in with the key she had never returned. The property management company had not asked for it, and she had not offered, and stood in the front hallway with a flashlight and listened to the house. It smelled the same. That particular combination of old wood and the specific cleaning product the management company used. A smell she had stopped registering within her first week of living here and had not thought about since. It hit her now like a memory she hadn't known she'd kept. She went to the living room. Moved the furniture slightly, pushed the coffee table to the side, centered the armchair to face the doorway. Sat down. Turned off the flashlight. And waited in the dark. The house was very quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of an empty building settling into the night. Something more intentional than that. The specific quality of silence that exists in a space that is holding its breath. She had noticed it before, in the months she had lived here, without having the language for it. The way the house sometimes felt less like a place and more like a pause. She understood it now. The house was not empty. It had never been empty. Not when she lived here, not in the weeks since she left, not in the years before she arrived. It was a threshold. This house was not a place where the thing lived. It was a place the thing moved through. A door it kept returning to. And the people who rented it, who slept in its rooms and locked its windows and convinced themselves they were safe. They were not tenants. They were inventory. At 3:17 a.m. she heard the back window. No dramatic sound. Just a soft, precise movement of wood against frame, the particular sound of something that had made this exact motion so many times it had perfected the quietness of it. Then silence. Then footsteps. Not heavy. Not rushed. The slow, unhurried footsteps of something moving through a space it knew by memory, in the dark, without needing to think about where the furniture was or which floorboard would creak or how many steps from the utility room to the hallway to the living room doorway. It knew this house the way she had never known it. It crossed the hallway. It reached the living room doorway. And it stopped. In the darkness, she could feel it there. The way you feel a change in pressure. The way a room feels different when it is not empty. She reached slowly to the lamp on the side table beside the chair. Turned it on. Then she reached to the floor lamp in the corner. The overhead switch on the wall behind her, which she had thought to turn on before she sat down. The kitchen light through the open doorway. Every source of light in the room, triggered in the space of 4 seconds, flooding the living room with a sudden flat brightness that left no corners, no gradations, nowhere for darkness to pool. And for the first time, she saw it clearly. It was tall. She had known that. But height alone had not prepared her for the full geometry of it, the way it occupied space slightly incorrectly, as though the laws governing volume and dimension applied to it differently than they applied to everything else in the room. Its face was almost right. That was the worst part. Not that it was monstrous. Not that it was grotesque. But that it was almost a face, the way a reflection in disturbed water is almost a face, all the elements present, all of them slightly wrong, assembled by something that had studied the concept of a human face from the outside and done its best reconstruction. Its hands were too long. Its head was tilted at that angle she recognized from the nightmares. It stood in her living room doorway in the full light and looked at her, if looking was the right word for what those almost eyes were doing, with an expression she could not name because it was almost an expression, assembled from the same external study, the same patient and inhuman approximation. It did not move toward her. It simply regarded her. The way it always had. Christiana looked back at it. Her heart was doing something extraordinary in her chest. Her hands were gripping the arms of the chair with a force she could feel in her wrists, her elbows, her shoulders. Every animal instinct she possessed was generating the same single urgent signal. Run, 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 run. She did not run. She held its gaze, or what functioned as its gaze, and she said, in a voice that came out steadier than she had any right to expect, "I'm not leaving." Something changed. Not dramatically. Not with the cinematic finality of a thing defeated and dissolving. Just a shift. The quality of the air in the room. The specific pressure of its presence, which had been building since the moment she heard the back window, suddenly doing something she had no word for. Receding. It stood in the doorway for a moment that felt geological in its length. Then it stepped back. Into the hallway. 1 step. 2. The lamplight from the living room stretched into the hall and she watched it retreat into the boundary of the dark beyond the light's reach, and then it was in the dark, and then it was simply gone. The hallway was empty. The house was quiet. Not the held breath quiet of before. Something different. Something that felt, if she was being precise about it, like the particular silence of a room after a door has been closed. Christiana did not move for a long time. She sat in the lit living room of the house on Vellum Road and listened to the silence and waited for something else to happen. Nothing did. At some point she called Ro. Told him she was okay. Heard the specific quality of his exhale. A man who had been sitting 2 streets away in his car for 90 minutes releasing something he had been holding very carefully. "Is it gone?" he asked. "Yes," she said. A pause. "Are you sure?" She looked at the empty hallway. The dark beyond the lamplight. "No," she said honestly. In the morning she made coffee she didn't drink. She opened her laptop and started a transcription file, the ordinary mechanical work of an ordinary morning, the same work she had been doing on a Tuesday night in late October when this began. After a while she went to the bedroom closet. The mark was still there. The single vertical line scratched into the white paint at eye level. She looked at it for a moment, then stepped closer to check what she had already known. In the way you sometimes know things before you confirm them, in the way the body understands things slightly ahead of the mind. Beside the original line. Freshly scratched. Paint dust still pale on the floor below it. A second line. She looked at it for a long time. 2 lines. She had not been the first. She had known that from the beginning, the Callaway tenant, the others, the years of vacancy that weren't really vacancy at all. But she had thought, last night, in the lit living room, with her voice steady and her hands gripping the chair arms, she had thought that she had done something. Changed something. Ended something. "I'm not leaving." And she hadn't. She had stayed. She had faced it in the light and it had retreated and the house had gone quiet and she had sat in the silence and believed, in the specific exhausted relief of 4 a.m., that she had broken the cycle. The second line looked back at her. Patient. Precise. Unhurried. The narration closes here. Quietly. She never found out what it was. Never found a name for it in any record or archive or account that felt like a match for what she had seen in that living room doorway. She stayed in the house on Vellum Road. Paid her rent. Did her work. Kept every light on after dark. She told herself that she had won. That standing her ground had meant something. That the second line was old, made before last night, missed by the officers who had photographed the first. She told herself that. But she kept the closet door closed after that. Wouldn't open it. Couldn't explain why, exactly, except that there are some things you can face in the light at 3 a.m. with your hands gripping a chair and your voice steady. And some things you can't afford to count.